We are learning more about the Belton High School student who died after being stabbed at school, allegedly by another student.
Belton police identified him as 18-year-old Jose Luis Ramirez Jr., a senior at the school. He died at Baylor Scott & White Medical Center tonight from his injuries.
And 6 News anchor Bailey Bates has been following this devastating story today. She joins us live in studio now with more. Bailey?
Leslie, Chris, it was a very somber day in the Belton community. Feelings of uneasiness, confusion, and sorrow took over after the stabbing at Belton High this morning. But tonight, not every parent is getting to hold their loved one. A scary situation at Belton High School Tuesday when the school was put on lockdown for a reported stabbing.
I'm in shock because I have an older son that graduated from here in 2018, and it's always been a great school. I'm in shock.
Pamela Owen rushed to pick up her 2 kids from school after getting a text she never expected.
I got the text from my son saying they're barricaded in a room, but he's safe. So what does a mom do? We panic.
Belton ISD opened Tiger Field as a reunification center with hundreds of parents and guardians waiting in line to get their loved ones.
I've been in crazier situations at school.
Emotions were high as unanswered questions loomed.
They're all right. They're a little in shock. You know, I mean, we didn't expect something like this to happen. I mean, who does?
Belton police say an altercation between 2 seniors happened in the men's restroom just before 10 a.m. And then 18-year-old Caysen Allison allegedly stabbed 18-year-old Jose Joe Ramirez. Ramirez died at the hospital Tuesday afternoon from the violent act.
You know how to make you crack a smile, know how to crack a joke, know how to make you laugh. Regardless of anything, he was always there for you. It's really who Joe was. He was always that person that even when you didn't see him, you knew he was there.
Tuesday evening, Martin Martinez and other friends and family gathered to remember their friend. Lots of tears shed as they didn't expect to have to say goodbye this soon.
Still in shock. I think everybody's still kind of processing it, doesn't really believe it.
The sea of red, Ramirez's favorite color, will keep moving forward, honoring his life and how there was never a dull moment. And their memories will never fade. A GoFundMe has been created to help Joe's family as they grieve a young life loss. You can find that link on our website, kcntv.com. We've also known that Belton High School has canceled classes for tomorrow as the school will be closed. Chris, Leslie.
All right, thanks, Bailey. Now, Belton Mayor Wayne Carpenter released this statement today saying in part, quote, "I am deeply saddened by the tragic incident at Belton High School today and send my prayers to all of those who have been impacted by it, particularly to the young victim and his family," end quote. He went on to say, "On behalf of all Beltonians, I want all students, faculty, and staff at Belton High School and Belton ISD to know that they are in our thoughts and prayers." The Belton High School student charged with stabbing his classmate to death has been indicted by a Bell County grand jury for murder. In early May, 18-year-old Caysen Allison was arrested for allegedly stabbing 18-year-old Joe Ramirez multiple times in a school bathroom. Ramirez died at a local hospital. According to an arrest affidavit, several students witnessed Allison stab Ramirez. The affidavit claims that Allison was arrested a short time later at his home and then admitted to the stabbing.
Well, the trial of Caysen Allison, the Belton High School student charged in the stabbing murder of his classmate, has been rescheduled. The trial was originally set for May 20th, but was delayed for parties to review potential evidence. 6 News anchor Bailey Bates is live in our studio tonight with the latest on this 2-year-old case. We won't know the outcome for a while now, Bailey.
Yeah, Lindsay, we know in today's hearing the judge, the prosecutor, and the defense attorney agreed to start the trial on January 13th of next year. That's when a Bell County jury will decide the fate for Caysen Allison. He's accused of stabbing and killing classmate Joe Ramirez in a Belton High bathroom on May 3rd, 2022. 2 years ago, 6 News obtained an arrest affidavit that said Ramirez was stabbed in the chest, back, legs, and arm. That affidavit also stated police obtained video that showed Allison stab Ramirez before the video abruptly comes to an end. According to online court records, we know that part of the reason trial has been delayed is for both the state and the defense to sort through and prepare potential evidence, including camera footage and several cell phones. A spectator in the courtroom at today's hearing tells me Caysen was present the first time in a while, and the defense attorney told the judge he had conflicts for much of the year, leaving the trial to not start until next year. Allison is out on bond, and we will keep you updated as we continue to follow this case, Lindsay. The trial of Caysen Allison is being delayed a third time. According to Bell County court records, Allison is facing murder charges for the death of his 18-year-old classmate, Jose Joe Ramirez Jr. The two allegedly got into a fight inside a school bathroom where Allison pulled a knife and stabbed Ramirez several times. The trial was set to begin January 13th. Now the trial is scheduled for March 31st. There is currently no word as to the reason for the additional delayment.
Today marked the beginning of the trial for a former Belton High student indicted for murder. Caysen Allison, who is 18 at the time, has been accused of murdering his classmate Joe Ramirez in a Belton High School bathroom.
Ramirez was stabbed multiple times and later died from the injuries. 6 News reporter Sydney Walker was in the courtroom today. Sydney, what did you learn?
I got here about 8:45 a.m. and the hallways of the Bell County Justice Center were jam-packed. That's largely because this jury pool consists of 120 people. When the trial begins, it will take place in District Court 478, which is Judge Faulkner's court, but the hearing today was in District Court 146 simply to accommodate the number of people. During today's proceedings, Allison sat quietly between his two defense attorneys. If found guilty, he faces between 5 to 99 years in prison or life. Judge Faulkner mentioned to the court he was aware of the high media coverage of this case and told jurors to avoid learning information outside of the court. There were also notices on the courtroom doors prohibiting recording and the use of cameras. When the hearing began, several jurors were dismissed or opted out. The state went first with its questions for the potential jurors, focusing heavily on the distinction between self-defense and deadly force, repeatedly asking where they drew the line between the two. Only late in the afternoon, around 2-ish, did they present vague details about the case. Once they revealed that the case involved school violence and a stabbing at Belton High, nearly 40 jurors raised their card to acknowledge they had previous knowledge of the case. Many expressed concern about the ability to remain unbiased. We will be hearing mostly from Allison's defense team tomorrow, since they didn't start their questioning until about 4-ish today, and then court convened about 4:30. But they did tell us today that they were here in defense of the law, not in defiance of the law. Jury selection will continue tomorrow, and the trial is expected to start in court on April 14th and will end no later than April 25th. I'll be here for you through it all. The morning didn't really get started until around 9:30, and what followed was Allison pleading not guilty. The witnesses were called to testify today, but overall today gave us a clearer picture of what went down in Belton High School hallways that May 3rd day. The prosecutor began in their opening statements revealing there is a recording of the incident. They also said that the conflict between Joe and Caysen began after an incident at a prom after party, and that Joe swung at Caysen first, accompanied by 4 others in that bathroom. The defense countered by saying that Allison was not guilty of murder because, quote, Caysen survived what could have very well been death or bodily injury by a group beatdown. The defense also made a motion to exclude photo and video evidence, which was denied by Judge Faulkner. The jury also saw security footage of the Belton High School hallways showing the students entering the bathroom and running out. This included video of Ramirez running out with a trail of blood behind him and eventually collapsing. Several witnesses took the stand today, including 911 dispatcher Amy Retz, security officer Philip Douglas Taylor, and teachers who responded to the scene. You can read more about the witnesses' testimony at kcentv.com. The trial is expected to continue tomorrow with more witnesses called to testify. I'll have more updates for you then.
5 more witnesses took the stand today in the murder trial of Caysen Allison.
Allison is facing charges alleging he stabbed and killed fellow Belton High School student Joe Ramirez. 6 News reporter Sydney Walker was back in the courtroom for day 2 of the trial. And Sydney, what did you hear from today?
Today we heard from a Belton PD detective who was there that day on the scene, as well as a close friend of Caysen's who tried to break up the fight before it even happened, plus 3 boys who were in the bathroom the day of the fight when it occurred. Yesterday we heard a lot from staff about what Joe's injuries were and the response that was taken, but today was focused way more on the dynamics between the 2 boys as well as their respective friend groups. For instance, after multiple graphic crime scene photos were shown, we learned from a Belton PD detective's testimony that he had obtained a video taken inside the bathroom by one of Joe's friends. His friend admitted Ramirez liked to have his fights recorded, but that he deleted the video because he was, quote, scared of what happened. The video shows Ramirez punching Allison, and Allison swinging back a knife in his right hand. Allison is later cornered, and a scream can be heard coming from Ramirez. We're also learning more about what led to that May 3rd day. Multiple witnesses today shared that the tension between the two began at a prom after party at Allison's girlfriend's house, and that plans to fight after school and off campus were in place. Allison's friends testified that he had told her about the plans, but, quote, he didn't want to fight. He wanted to graduate. We ran out of time during the testimony of one of the boys who was in the bathroom, but he's set to return tomorrow when the trial returns at 9 a.m. To read more about what the witnesses testified today, go to kcentv.com.
Today, testimony continued in the murder trial of Caysen Allison, a former Belton High student accused of stabbing and killing a fellow student.
6 News reporter Sydney Walker was back at the Bell County Justice Complex. Sydney, what'd you learn?
Today we heard from 3 more boys who were present in the bathroom during the fight. Plus we got more context about what happened at a prom after party that caused tension between Allison and Ramirez. The first boy, who had already been questioned by the state yesterday, faced cross-examination today. The defense asked him, quote, would you wait for the second punch? And, quote, would you gamble with your life or would you end the fight? State redirected with, quote, would you stab somebody in a fist fight? To which the student replied no. Another student who was in the bathroom simply by chance revealed that Belton High students caught in fights were fined $300 in tickets. He also confirmed that the bathroom doors can lock from both the outside and inside, but it is still unknown if the bathroom was or was not locked by Ramirez. Last up for the day was Ramirez's brother. He testified that at a prom after party, Allison acted aggressive and inappropriate toward his prom date, which caused his brother to step in. Afterward, a Snapchat group was created where Allison shared with Ramirez plans to fight in the woods of West Temple Park. The trial was finished today around 12:30 due to some scheduling conflicts, so we'll hear more from Joe Ramirez's brother tomorrow when the trial resumes at 9 a.m. Ramirez's brother returned to the stand today along with 2 others. Emotions ran high today, with one member in the gallery removed from the gallery after he yelled out at the defense, calling him ignorant, and was escorted out of the courtroom. Ramirez's brother, plus a medical examiner and a close friend of Caysen, were on the stand today. Today we learned Joe Ramirez had been previously arrested for assault when he was 18 and the victim was 17. He was brought to tears. Ramirez's brother was brought to tears when videos from that day were shown to him. The defense also asked if Ramirez was, quote, mad that Caysen fought back, to which he replied, I'm mad that he killed my brother. Next up was a medical examiner who oversaw Ramirez's autopsy. He shared that their examination found 4 separate stab wounds on Ramirez's body. The examiner said that the cause of death was stabbing, with homicide as the matter of death. We learned there was 1 large stab wound across Ramirez's chest, which caused multiple injuries to both the heart itself and the left lung, as well as 2 stab wounds on his buttocks and a wound on his upper back and left forearm. Last up for the day was a friend of Allison who shared that he had heard from others that Allison had brought a knife to school that day, but was unsure if Allison had told him this personally. That friend will be back next week to testify and probably talk about some evidence that was discussed today, consisting of 2 text message chains between Allison and the friend. Trial will not resume until Monday, April 21st. We'll be back for you then.
Today marked day 5 of the murder trial of Caysen Allison, with 4 more witnesses taking the stand, including 2 detectives.
One testimony that really stands out from today comes from an ex-girlfriend of Joe Ramirez and a close friend of Caysen Allison. She shared that Allison had told her directly threats towards Joe Ramirez. Another close friend of Allison returned to the stand today discussing text messages between the 2 of them, and those texts contained things like Allison saying, "Bro, bring me a gun," and discussion of Joe and their altercation at the prom after party. That friend said that the after party is where this all started, and that it was his understanding that Ramirez had pulled a gun on Allison at this party. Next up was Ramirez's girlfriend, who said that Allison had told her personally that, quote, he wanted Joe on life support and wanted to stomp his head in. Most of the day was spent questioning Belton police investigator Robert Preston. He shared a recovered Snapchat audio recording, which includes Allison detailing Ramirez pulling a gun on him at the prom after party, calling Ramirez names, and saying he wanted to, quote, send him to the hospital. In cross-examination, the defense mostly attempted to discredit his investigation and the methods used, asking why he didn't review certain security videos or obtain witnesses' phones when the high school was still on lockdown. Lastly, Detective Robert Gatewood shared an audio recording from when he had arrested Allison at his home. Allison can be heard asking someone to come get him and take him to Waco, followed by his arrest when he says, quote, "I was just trying to protect myself." That witness was on stand for most of the day. In cross-examination, the defense mostly asked him to discredit his investigation. There's still more witnesses to come. This trial is still ongoing. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Today, a Belton PD detective took the stand and showed evidence confirming that the lock on the bathroom door was not functioning from the inside. This comes after multiple claims from the defense that Ramirez had locked the door during the fight. Up first for the day was a Temple police officer who worked with the K-9 unit to find the murder weapon. The small black folding knife was found in a field close to the roadway where Allison had told them it was. Allison had thrown the knife out of his car window on the way home from Belton High. The investigation's primary detective, Gene Cole, testified next. He shared that Allison told him that he had taken the knife from his stepdad's closet that morning because he, quote, knew if he saw Josh and Joe in the bathroom, there was going to be a fight. The detective also detailed Belton PD's initial questioning of Allison, sharing that Allison told him he did not remember how many times he stabbed Joe. A video taken by Detective Cole was then shown, determining that, quote, the lock did not actually work and could not be engaged from the inside. Furthermore, Cole said that Allison had never mentioned anything to him about Joe or Josh Rios locking the door. We ended at about 2 p.m. today due to some scheduling issues, but we can expect to hear from Detective Cole tomorrow when he continues his testimony when the trial returns at 9 a.m.
Well, the prosecution rested its case today in the murder trial of Caysen Allison.
Detective Gene Cole, who was the primary detective on the investigation into the stabbing at Belton High, was on the stand for almost 5 hours, and that's just today. This isn't including his testimony from yesterday as well. After the state rested its case, the defense called 3 witnesses in the last hour of today. The full over an hour long video of detectives' initial questioning of Allison was shown to the jury today. The video shows Allison lying his head down on the desk and eventually lying on the ground and vomiting in a trash can. In the video, Allison revealed that he took the knife from his stepdad's closet that morning out of fear of being jumped by Ramirez, and also that before Ramirez had punched him, he had pulled the knife out and told Ramirez, quote, "Don't touch me or I'm going to stab you." What followed was a long period of pushback from the defense regarding the overall investigation. They asked why Allison was questioned even though he was visibly ill, why Allison was not Mirandized in a more serious matter, and why Cole did not view security footage previously. They also asked once again why phones were not collected at the scene before the lockdown was lifted. The prosecution rested their case just before 4 p.m., and the defense then called 3 witnesses. First was the doctor who treated Allison in the emergency department. He confirmed that Allison was given a CT scan to rule out serious head injuries like a brain bleed or skull fracture, and also confirmed his diagnosis of a closed head injury. Next was a close friend of Allison who was supposed to fight alongside Allison in the planned fight off campus. He said that that fight was supposed to occur around 5 p.m. that day and take place in a 3-on-3 format. Last up was a teacher and coach from Belton High who helped stop Ramirez's brother from chasing Allison down the hallway. He shared that Josh Rios had told him that his brother was stabbed in the bathroom, and the two went to check assuming that Ramirez would still be in there. After that, he took Josh to the nurse's office and kept him in there, assuming that, quote, the best way to help Joe was to let the nurses work. In cross-examination, the accuracy of claims made by Allison's friend about who initiated the planning of the fight altogether was questioned, and Snapchat group chats were discussed. We ended right at 5 p.m. today, but we'll be back at 9 a.m. tomorrow to hear the defense continue their case.
Both the defense and the prosecution have now closed and rested their cases in the murder trial of Caysen Allison.
Allison is accused of stabbing classmate Joe Ramirez nearly 3 years ago. 6 News reporter Sydney Walker has been in the courtroom since the trial started. So Sydney, what happens now?
Yeah, both sides have rested, but they got a lot done. In the past 2 weeks, we've heard from over 30 witnesses. 5 of them took the stand today, including one familiar face. A friend of Allison shared today that he saw someone pull a gun on Allison at the prom after party, but it was not Ramirez. After that, a person testified that they had been jumped by Ramirez in the past. Later, Belton PD Captain Richard Spurgeon testified that he got a statement from Josh Rios at the hospital that day, but Rios had not been very, quote, forthcoming. He also said that they had been made aware friends of Ramirez had been seeking retribution that day. When Rios returned to the stand, the defense listed things that he failed to tell law enforcement the first time. Rios said that he was going through a lot of emotions when he was questioned by Spurgeon at the hospital and said his brother's life was the main thing on his mind at the time. Last up for the day was Allison's mom, who shared 2 photos of Allison she had taken when he had arrived home that day on the incident, showing blood on his face and a busted lip. After both sides closed, the jury was excused until Monday morning at 9 a.m. That will give the judge and the counsel some time to discuss the charges and finalize them. When the jury returns, we'll hear that official charge and also those closing arguments.
Well, following a conference with the judge and jury today, the court has decided on a final charge for Caysen Allison. We're waiting to hear back from the court on what that charge is. 6 News was at the court during initial discussions this morning. We know the judge has instructed the jury to consider charging Allison with murder, manslaughter, or criminally negligent homicide. Right now, he's accused of stabbing classmate Joe Ramirez to death back in 2022 during a fight in a Belton High School bathroom.
Yeah, we were all waiting in the hallway anxiously for that verdict to come in, but we're going to have to wait a little bit longer because the jury in the trial of Caysen Allison has just been sequestered. They will continue their deliberations for another day. At about 12:15, the jury went into a closed room to start their deliberations and begin discussion. In the hours since then, the hallways have been packed as people are waiting. At 5, they notified people that if they left the building, they would not be let back into the building because that's when the Justice Complex closes. A food vendor, though, stayed open until 7, though he ran out of most of his supply and was left with only snacks. We saw boxes of pizza brought in for the on-duty officers, the jury, and even members of the council. Finally, the jury asked to conclude for the evening and was sequestered. They had brought a packed bag in anticipation of this.
This evening, tonight, Judge Wade Faulkner, who's the district judge for the 478th, who's been hearing the trial that y'all been covering the last couple of weeks, has ordered Sheriff Bill Cook, the sheriff of Bell County, to sequester the jury. We have moved them to an undisclosed hotel location where they will remain under the security of the sheriff's office.
In reaching a verdict, all 12 jurors must agree that a charge is or is not proven beyond reasonable doubt. First, the jury must consider 3 different theories of murder. If they find none to be proven, they then consider self-defense. If neither are agreed upon, manslaughter is then discussed. If they don't agree on that, self-defense must be considered. Lastly, criminally negligent homicide is considered. Of course, they can also find Allison not guilty on all charges or struggle to agree, resulting in a mistrial. Well, the court is in recess until the jury agrees on that verdict, and we are going to have to wait just another day. But the Judge Faulkner ordered the sheriff to return the jury tomorrow at 9 a.m. to consider and continue their deliberations, consider all the evidence, and hopefully we are one step closer to that verdict. I'll be back tomorrow with an update as soon as we have one. Live in Belton, Sydney Walker, 6 News.
Sydney, thanks for hanging in there. I know it's been a long day for the jury and for you. Thanks so much.
After more than 2 weeks of trial today, a jury found former Belton High student Caysen Allison guilty of criminally negligent homicide.
It's the least severe charge he faced, as the jury found him not guilty of murder and manslaughter. We now go to 6 News reporter Sydney Walker live at the Bell County Justice Complex. Sydney, how was it today?
And the jury finally came back with their verdict today at about 10:45 a.m. This comes after they heard from over 20 witnesses, viewed, heard, saw all of the above, all sorts of evidence that led them to believe that Caysen Allison had acted criminally negligent, resulting in the death of Joe Ramirez almost 3 years ago today in that Belton High bathroom. Based on the verdict, the 12 members of the jury believed that the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Allison had acted criminally negligent, resulting in the death of Joe Ramirez. After Allison was found guilty, his defense attorney, Zach Boyd, asked the judge if Allison's ankle monitor could be removed. The state objected to this and asked Faulkner to find his bond insufficient. The judge denied both of these requests. Allison faces anywhere from 6 months to 2 years in prison, but we will have to wait until June 16th for that sentencing. When news of a verdict came in, people piled into the courtroom, anxiously awaiting, some even already crying. Allison's defense team acknowledged the high emotions in this case.
This was a hard case, and nobody should ever outlive their child. No human being should have their child die in a violent way. And I'm so sorry for their loss. And the Allison family is so sorry for their loss, because there is no good outcome to this.
When news of a verdict came in, people piled into the courtroom, anxiously awaiting. Before the verdict was read, Judge Faulkner reminded everyone that the court would not allow any verbal outbursts, disrespect, or standing out of seats, regardless of what verdict was read. The jury had been deliberating from 12:15 p.m. last night to about 9 p.m. last night, when they then requested to be sequestered. Before the verdict was read, Judge Faulkner reminded everyone about the rules of the court, like I said earlier, and the jury had been deliberating from 12:15 to about 9 p.m. last night, when they requested to be sequestered. But they came back at 9 a.m. today, discussed for about 2 hours, and then arrived at that verdict when they found out that Allison was accused and found guilty of criminal negligence. So, yes.
All right, thanks so much, Sydney.
Well, the verdict come as a pivotal moment in a case that has drawn intense scrutiny since the fatal stabbing at Belton High School in 2022. The jury had 4 different options under Texas homicide law: acquittal, murder, manslaughter, or criminally negligent homicide.
They chose the least severe of the criminal options, rejecting the state's allegations that Allison intended to kill Ramirez. 6 News reporter Juliana Jackson has more on the legal implications of this verdict. Juliana?
It's important to break down the legal differences between these charges. Murder requires intent to kill or cause serious bodily injury. Manslaughter involves recklessly causing death, and while criminally negligent homicide is when someone causes death by taking a substantial and unjustifiable risk that results in death.
Often one of those cases that we refer to as splitting the baby. There were likely people on both sides of the fence. They were given many options.
Self-defense played a pivotal role in the Caysen Allison trial.
The defendant say, yes, I committed the offense. However, I was justified in doing so. So that completely shifts the narrative of the case. We don't have a defendant saying, it wasn't me, I didn't do it.
The jury's verdict suggests they believed Allison's actions went beyond what a reasonable person would consider necessary self-defense, but did not find he intended to kill Ramirez or acted with conscious disregard for human life. Criminally negligent homicide punishment ranges typically from 180 days to 2 years in a state jail facility. However, there's one factor that could alter Allison's sentence.
If there is an affirmative finding of a deadly weapon, the judge cannot give the defendant probation. So whether or not there is a deadly weapon finding in this case is critically important.
Even though a knife was used in this case, an affirmative finding of a deadly weapon is not automatic. It must be specifically found by either the jury or the judge. Allison has chosen to have Judge Faulkner determine his sentence rather than the jury. Legal analyst Liz Mitchell says this could be a strategic decision.
We have a defendant who has never been involved in the criminal justice system. He is basically set up for a successful life. A jury, it's sometimes harder for jurors to put emotion aside and look just at the facts. With judges, they are looking strictly at the facts.
While many criminal convictions are automatically appealed, appealing this verdict could be dangerous for Allison.
If he appeals the case and it's reversed and remanded, meaning it is sent back to the trial court, the state can try him again, and that means you are rolling the dice and could possibly be convicted of murder the second time around.
Allison will remain free on bond until sentencing hearing, which is set for June 16th at 9 a.m. At that time, we'll learn whether a deadly weapon finding will be made and whether Allison will serve his sentence on probation or in custody. You can stay updated here on 6 News.
Allison's defense attorney, Zachary Boyd, spoke moments after the verdict was delivered.
All right, folks, let's talk about this verdict. You heard it. After the jury listened to everything, after they waded through the mud and the murky waters churned up by a less than perfect investigation, they came back with criminally negligent homicide. Now the state, they started out hard swinging and crying murder. They wanted everyone to believe that my client, this young man, Caysen Allison, was a cold-blooded murderer. But that's not the verdict you heard today. The jury looked at the evidence. They looked at all of the evidence, or rather, they looked at the lack of all of the evidence. The vital pieces that were ignored or mishandled, and they said no, not murder. They didn't even say manslaughter, which is a step down and requires recklessness or a conscious disregard of risk. No, they found criminally negligent homicide. Now, what does that mean under Texas law? It means that Caysen caused the death, but it was by criminal negligence. It's about failing to perceive a substantial and unjustifiable risk that his actions would cause the death. It's a gross deviation from what an ordinary person should have been aware. Think about that. It means the jury found he did not intend to kill, or even that he was aware of the specific risk, but decided to ignore it. They found he should have been aware, based on his actions in a moment of sheer terror and chaos. This verdict, while it is not the full acquittal that we were seeking, is a clear rejection of the state's case and the state's primary narrative. It tells us that the jury grappled with the context of what happened in that bathroom that day on May 3rd of 2022. They heard about the after-prom party where someone from Joe's group pulled a gun on Caysen. They heard Sam Ramirez testify despite his own fear about witnessing that gun being brandished. They heard from Corbin Ovale tell you about Joe Ramirez's history of violence and his group and their history of jumping people. They heard Angel Murillo say Caysen didn't want to fight and Joe tried to lock the bathroom door. Tito Chamel was the cameraman. He confirmed that Joe tried to lock the door and initiated the encounter. He also said that he was recording the fight because Joe liked to have his fights recorded. They saw Caysen's injuries from the attack consistent with being sucker punched. They heard Caysen's own words from the interview that he was rushed and punched after they took off their backpacks and approached him. And all of this evidence, the evidence the state often tried to ignore or minimize or mislead the jury on, painted a picture of a young man facing a perceived threat of serious bodily injury or death who was trapped in a small, confined, inescapable place, a boys' bathroom. And we all know that nothing good ever happens in the boys' bathroom. Self-defense under the law the judge gave allowed for the deadly use of force if he reasonably believed it was immediately necessary to protect himself. There was no self-defense option in regards to criminally negligent homicide. The jury had to consider whether or not the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Caysen did not act in self-defense, and they wholly failed to do so. And let's not forget the shadow cast by the investigation itself. The failure to Mirandize Caysen at the arrest, the minimization of Caysen Allison's rights under Miranda at the beginning of his interrogation, watching with callous disregard as Caysen's injuries continue to hurt him. He continues to feel worse throughout the interview, such that at one point he lays down on the floor and vomits. And the quote you hear from the law enforcement officer, Detective Gatewood, at that time is, "You weren't kidding, were you, Caysen?" because Caysen was telling the truth in that interview as best as he knew it after having sustained a closed head injury that was diagnosed at the ER when they had to rule out a brain bleed by CT to make sure he wasn't more injured than he actually was. These were not minor hiccups. They didn't even try to investigate self-defense. They didn't even try to put together a day in the life video of each of the boys that day when they arrived at school, when they went to their first period class, when they left their first period class and walked to the bathroom at A100 in that wing where these events took place, and then when they left. Because it was too much footage, I guess. We had 18 plus terabytes of video. They said, law enforcement said they looked at less than an hour of video. They simply chose not to do a complete, thorough, and comprehensive investigation. The jury, by returning a verdict of criminally negligent homicide, has told us they didn't buy the state's argument that Caysen acted with intent to kill or even act with reckless disregard for life in that moment. They saw a young man scared, injured, reacting in a sudden, violent encounter that others initiated and escalated. This verdict reflects a finding of a lower level of culpability, recognizing the chaos and fear Caysen experienced, which may have prevented him from fully perceiving the risk in that split second, even if an ordinary person hypothetically should have. This is not over. We move on to the sentencing phase. We will continue to fight for justice for Caysen Allison, a young man who was trying to graduate, trying to avoid trouble. He was thrust into a terrifying situation, and this verdict acknowledges that what happened was a tragedy, and it rejects the state's attempt to paint Caysen as a murderer. It brings us closer to the truth, a truth based on layers, a truth rooted in self-preservation in the face of fear and attack.